All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. And this one is all about confidence. More specifically, you want to feel more confident when you're speaking English. We've got a great snippet of advice that someone sent in.
Yeah,
And it's interesting because it's not even the whole piece of advice, but it's enough to kind of pick apart and see if there are any nuggets of wisdom that we can glean from it.
absolutely.
So ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right, so here's what it says, and you can follow along with me. It just says, pasted text, how to feel more confident when speaking English. So even without all the details, what jumps out at you?
Well, I think the fact that it really focuses on that feeling of confidence, even before we even get into the how-to, the fact that it's emphasizing feeling more confident when you're speaking English, that's something I think we can all relate to. Even as native speakers, we have those moments where we're like, ooh, I don't know if I'm saying this right, or am I communicating this effectively? So I think that's interesting right off the bat.
It is, and you're right, like just by calling that out, just by saying, hey, I want to feel more confident when I do this, that's such a good starting point. Because a lot of times we do get caught up in the how. Like, okay, but tell me the 5 steps I need to take to be perfect.
Yeah.
But this is really saying, no, let's just address that feeling first.
Yeah.
And I like that it says more confident.
Right.
It's not like you're going to become this completely different person. You're just going to feel a little bit more confident as you go.
Exactly. It's building on what you already have. We're not starting from scratch here. It's like we're taking what you already have and we're going to just kind of like boost it a little bit.
Exactly. Now, what about you? Anything else kind of pop out at you?
Well, I think that when you look at the word when, right? So it's when speaking English. So it's like it's giving you that little condition. It's not just like be more confident. It's like, no, there's a specific time when you're speaking English. So it's interesting that it kind of narrows it down to those specific situations.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you mean. Like instead of this vague idea of, oh, I just need more confidence in general, it's like, okay, no, when you're speaking English. So maybe there are specific things you can do or think about in those moments.
Right, exactly. And the fact that it's emphasizing speaking English, it's not just like English grammar or vocabulary. It's really about that act of communication,
Yeah.
which can be the most, I don't know, I think for a lot of people, the scariest part of learning a language.
It's true, because it's one thing to like study, your verbs and your tenses and things, but then to actually put it into practice,
Right.
to have a conversation, it's like it requires a different kind of confidence.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, even though we don't have all of the pasted text, that's where I think some of that advice probably lies, is how do you build that confidence, particularly when you're in those situations where you're actually speaking?
Right. Yeah. And it makes me wonder what the original advice was going to be.
Mm.
But I think even without it, there are things that our listeners can do right now to just feel a little bit more confident, even without the full picture. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of it, like with any skill, comes down to practice, right? The more you do something, the more comfortable you become. And with speaking English, I mean, the beautiful thing is you have so many opportunities to practice these days. Even if you don't live in an English-speaking country, you have things like language exchange apps.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've used those.
Right.
Super helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's an amazing way to kind of, dip your toes in the water. You can connect with people from all over the world who are also learning English or want to practice their English. You can even, kind of role play different scenarios. Like you mentioned wanting to feel more confident when you're ordering food. Maybe you can use a language exchange app to actually practice ordering food.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Actually go through the whole thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And that way, when you're in that real life situation, it's not so nerve-wracking because you've kind of like rehearsed it in your mind.
That's like anything else. Yeah. The
Yeah.
more you practice, the less scary it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
And another thing I would add is don't underestimate the power of, recording yourself.
oh, yeah.
It might sound a little silly, but it can be really helpful to actually hear yourself speak.
Right.
Because sometimes we don't realize, like, maybe our pronunciation is a little bit off, or maybe we're speaking too quickly. And so by recording yourself, you can kind of pinpoint those areas where you might want to improve.
Yeah. And there's no pressure when you're recording yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. You can do it in the comfort of your own home. You can listen back to it as many times as you want, and you can really focus on like your pacing, your clarity. And again, it's just another way to build that confidence muscle.
I love that. And it's funny you mentioned that because I remember when I was learning Spanish, and I would record myself having these like full-blown conversations with myself. And it felt so weird at the time, but it did help.
It does help. And I think it's also important to, be kind to yourself throughout this process. It's easy to get caught up in the mistakes, we all make them. But I think the important thing is to focus on celebrating the small victories. Like if you were able to successfully order your food, even if you stumbled over a word or two, that's still a win.
It is.
And I think it's important to keep that in mind because every interaction, every sentence you speak, it's a learning opportunity. And the more you can approach it with that mindset, the more confident you'll become over time.
I love that. Such a good reminder to be kind to ourselves as we're learning. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. What is one specific situation? And it could be anything. It could be ordering food. It could be giving a presentation. It could be just chatting with a friend. What is one specific situation where you would like to feel more confident speaking English? And once you have that situation in mind, I want you to really visualize yourself in that moment, feeling completely at ease, expressing yourself clearly and confidently, and connecting with that other person in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Because the more you can visualize that success, the more attainable it becomes. And that's it for today's deep dive. As always, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next one.
See you next time.